Name the admiral who won the Battle of Midway. Not the admiral who planned it. Not the admiral who commanded the Pacific Fleet. The admiral who stood on the bridge of USS Enterprise on June 4, 1942, and made the decisions that destroyed the Imperial Japanese Navy's carrier force and changed the course of the Second World War. You cannot name them. Almost nobody can. And here is the uncomfortable truth about why. We have built an entire mythology around the Pacific War. The swagger, the cowboy commanders, the headlines. And in doing so, we buried the man who actually won it. We buried him because the way he won did not make for good stories. It did not make for good photographs. It made, instead, for something much rarer and much harder to sell. A mind that refused at every moment of maximum pressure to be impressive. That man was Raymond Ames Spruance. And this is the story of what he understood about war and about winning that almost everyone around him did not. Here is what you need to know about Raymond Spruance's background, and I am going to give it to you fast because Spruance himself would have wanted it that way. Born in Baltimore on July 3, 1886. Unremarkable childhood. Entered the Naval Academy at Annapolis in 1903. Graduated in 1906, ranked 26th in a class of 209. Good, but not exceptional. Not the number you put on a press release. What nobody remembers about the young Spruance is that he was, by every account of his contemporaries, almost aggressively uninteresting at social functions. He did not drink. He walked compulsively, 5 to 10 miles a day, often alone. His idea of a good conversation was a sustained argument about engineering. His fitness reports consistently noted his outstanding professional ability, and then, almost apologetically, added nothing else. There was nothing else to add. He was not charismatic. He was not theatrical. He was, in the parlance of the pre-war Navy, a battleship man, an engineering officer, not a flyer, which in 1942 was roughly equivalent to being told you were a very good horse, just as the automobile was invented. The Pacific War, everyone understood, was going to be a war of carriers. And Raymond Spruance had never commanded one. By the spring of 1942, the United States Navy was losing. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 had destroyed the battleship force. The fall of the Philippines in April 1942 had cost 76,000 American and Filipino soldiers. And on May 8, 1942, USS Lexington, one of only 4 American fleet carriers in the Pacific, was sunk at the Battle of the Coral Sea. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commanding the Pacific Fleet from Pearl Harbor, knew 3 things in late May 1942. First, that the Japanese were planning a massive assault on Midway Atoll, an operation that, if successful, would give them a base from which to threaten Hawaii itself. Second, that he knew this because a team of code breakers under Commander Joseph Rochefort had cracked enough of the Japanese naval code JN-25 to piece together the plan. And third, the thing that made all the other things almost unbearably fragile, that he could not tell the Japanese he knew. Everything Nimitz did for the next 3 weeks had to look like a coincidence. He had 3 carriers. Japan would arrive at Midway with 4, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, plus 2 battleships, 11 destroyers, and over 200 aircraft. The man Nimitz wanted commanding his carrier task force was Admiral William Bull Halsey, his most aggressive and experienced carrier commander, a man whose name the Japanese already feared. But Halsey was in the hospital. Severe dermatitis had put him flat on his back in a Honolulu ward, and he would be there for weeks. Lying in that hospital bed, Halsey did something remarkable. He recommended his own replacement. He turned to Nimitz and said, essentially, give it to Spruance. I keep coming back to this moment because it tells you something important about how talent actually works in high-stakes environments. Halsey was not modest. He was not self-effacing. He was, by most accounts, vain in the way successful men are often vain. And yet, in the most important professional recommendation of the war, he looked past temperament, past image, past the question of who would look right in a press photograph, and named the man who he believed would think right under pressure. That is a form of intelligence that most institutions never develop. The Navy got lucky that Halsey had it. Spruance received the command on May 28, 1942. He had 8 days to prepare. The night of June 3, 1942. USS Enterprise is somewhere northwest of Midway. The task force is running under radio silence. Tomorrow, everyone aboard knows this. They can feel it in the routine that has gone strangely careful and precise. Tomorrow, the Japanese fleet will appear. Spruance was known to retire early. He slept well before battle. This was not courage exactly, or not only courage. It was discipline applied to the body the same way he applied it to everything else, methodically, without drama. But on the night of June 3rd, a letter exists. It was written to his daughter Margaret. It has not been widely quoted. It runs to 3 paragraphs. In it, Spruance does not mention the battle coming. He asks how her piano lessons are going. He says he hopes the weather in California has been good. He notes that he has been walking on the flight deck in the evenings and that the sunsets over the Pacific have been, in his word, fine. Fine. 4 Japanese carriers will appear on the horizon in approximately 12 hours. 150,000 square miles of ocean are about to become the most contested water on Earth. And Raymond Spruance, 55 years old, the man who holds the outcome in his hands, is writing home about sunsets. Not bravado, not suppression, just proportion. An understanding so deep it had become reflexive that what was coming tomorrow would be handled tomorrow. Tonight, he was a father. June 4th, 1942, 0552 hours. A Catalina patrol plane out of Midway spots the Japanese carrier force and transmits a position report. At 0702, a second report confirms 4 carriers bearing 320 degrees, distance 180 miles, course southeast. Spruance was given this information and made an immediate calculation, one that his own operations officer, Captain Miles Browning, pushed back against. The standard doctrine called for waiting until the Japanese were closer, perhaps 100 miles, to maximize the chance that American aircraft could return with enough fuel to land safely. Launching now at 180 miles meant many pilots would not make it back. Spruance launched now. His reasoning, reconstructed from his after-action report and the later account of historian John Lundstrom, was precise and cold. The Japanese carriers would be conducting their own air operations against Midway at the moment his aircraft arrived. The flight decks would be cluttered with rearming aircraft. The fuel lines would be live. The Japanese would be, for perhaps 30 minutes, catastrophically vulnerable. That window was worth more than the fuel margins. He launched 116 aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 8, 15 Devastator torpedo bombers from Hornet, led by Lieutenant Commander John C. Waldron, found the Japanese force first. They attacked without fighter escort. They flew in at low altitude, slow and straight, and the Japanese Combat Air Patrol destroyed them almost entirely. Waldron was killed. Every single aircraft was shot down. Of the 30 men who flew that mission, 1 survived. The torpedo attacks accomplished nothing. Militarily, tactically, nothing, except that they pulled the Japanese fighter screen down to the deck. And at 10:22 hours, 37 dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown, arriving at altitude, looked down at 3 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, and found them completely undefended. In the next 6 minutes, all 3 ships were fatally hit. Hiryu, the 4th carrier, escaped the first strike and launched a counterattack that severely damaged Yorktown, which would later be sunk by a Japanese submarine. But before the day was over, dive bombers from Enterprise found Hiryu and hit her 4 times. She was scuttled the following morning. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, gone in less than 12 hours. If you've stayed with this story this far, you already know this channel doesn't do the surface version. Subscribing takes 2 seconds, and it means more of this finds its way to people who want it. Now, back to what Spruance did next, because this is where the argument really begins. By the evening of June 4th, the strategic situation had reversed completely. Japan had lost 4 fleet carriers and over 200 experienced naval aviators. The United States had lost 1 carrier and the bulk of a torpedo squadron. Any aggressive commander, and the Pacific Fleet had several who fit that description, would have pressed the pursuit. Chase the retreating Japanese fleet into the night. Keep the pressure on. Spruance did not. He turned his task force east and waited. This decision was called, at the time and for decades afterward, excessively cautious. Some historians, including the combative Samuel Eliot Morison, whose multi-volume naval history remains a standard reference, suggested that Spruance missed an opportunity to complete the destruction of the Japanese surface fleet. Spruance, they argued, had won a battle, but not a campaign. I think this criticism fundamentally misunderstands what Spruance was protecting. He had, at that moment, the last 3 functioning American fleet carriers in the Pacific. A night surface engagement against a Japanese battleship force, which was still intact, still faster, still equipped with the deadly long-lance torpedo, risked turning a decisive victory into a catastrophic draw, or worse. The carriers were not, to Spruance's mind, a tool for pursuing an already beaten enemy. They were the strategic reserve of the entire Pacific War. "You do not gamble a reserve on a bonus," he wrote in his after-action report on June 16, 1942. "I did not feel justified in risking a night encounter with possibly superior enemy forces." 27 words, no flourish, no apology. That same cold arithmetic, applied repeatedly over the next 3 years, would make Spruance one of the most successful naval commanders in the history of warfare. He commanded Task Force 58 at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, the largest carrier battle in history, and made the same choice again, refusing to pursue a retreating enemy fleet in the dark and absorbing enormous criticism for it. He was called the Elephant by some of his staff. Too slow, too careful, too reluctant to finish. He won anyway. Every time. Raymond Spruance retired from active duty in 1948. He served as ambassador to the Philippines from 1952 to 1955. He died in Pebble Beach, California on December 13, 1969, at the age of 83. He never wrote a memoir. There is a reason that Halsey, brash, quotable, camera-ready, fills more pages in popular histories of the Pacific War than Spruance. Halsey won battles and then explained loudly and repeatedly why he had won them. Spruance won battles and then wrote reports. Thomas Buell's biography, published in 1974 and titled simply "The Quiet Warrior," remains the definitive account, and the title is the summary. It took 32 years after Midway for someone to write that book. The numbers from Midway alone are staggering. Japan lost 3,057 men in the 4-day battle, 292 aircraft, and 4 carriers that had taken years and enormous industrial resources to build. The United States lost 307 men and 147 aircraft. The ratio of exchange in ships, in trained pilots, in strategic position was so lopsided that Japanese Admiral Nagano Osami reportedly told the Emperor, "We cannot be certain of victory in a war against the United States." He said this 9 months after Pearl Harbor. One afternoon, one man, one calculation. Here is what Spruance understood that the mythology of military leadership resists. The job of a commander is not to be brilliant in the moment. It is to not be stupid in the moment. The enemy is trying to make you react. They are trying to pull you out of your plan, your discipline, your cold arithmetic, and into their preferred terrain, which is chaos, speed, and the demand that you improvise. The commander who refuses that invitation, who absorbs the pressure and returns quietly to what he knows, is rarer and more dangerous than any amount of dash and aggression. Which raises the question that I genuinely do not have a comfortable answer to. We celebrate the Halseys. We always have. In war, in business, in politics. We build monuments to the commanders who look like they're winning, who fill the frame, who give us a story we can tell at dinner. And we build, at most, quiet biographies for the ones who actually won. The ones who walked the flight deck at sunset and wrote home about the weather because they had already done the only thinking that mattered, and they knew it. Spruance died in obscurity. Not poverty, not disgrace. Just obscurity. The particular kind that happens when history decides, without quite deciding, that a man's victories were too quiet to be worth remembering loudly. So here is the question. In your own world, the organization you work inside, the culture you navigate, the metrics by which success is measured, which kind of winning is actually rewarded? And is the answer the same as which kind of winning actually works? Because the Pacific Ocean in June 1942 didn't care about narrative. It only cared about arithmetic.